Los Angeles has been called many things: the City of Angels, Tinseltown, La La Land, but it gained more of a name for itself for a far less glamorous reason back in the 70s and 80s. California was known for being the serial killer capital of America. In the decades between 1969, with the Manson family murders, and in 1989, the conviction of the Night Stalker, the Skid Row stabber, the Sunset Strip killer, the West Side rapist, and the Toolbox killers, the Grim Sleeper, the Freeway killer, which actually ended up being three people and not just one person. During this period, more than 20 serial killers were reportedly operating simultaneously inside of LA. You lot must be thinking the same thing I am. Like, is there something in the water in LA? Because I definitely, before moving to America, my goal was to move to LA, but I think I'll keep my ass over here. Today, we're going to be talking about two cousins who unalived 10 women and dumping their bodies on the Hollywood hills of California, leaving no clues, having no motive. These men were known to have no compassion, empathy, or remorse, and just having a thirst for unaliving women. So go ahead and grab your brew and join me in this conversation as we talk about. This case actually caused an officer to the brink of obsession. It destroyed his marriage, but it soon became one of the longest trials in American history. Angelo Buono was a New Yorker who referred to himself as the Italian stallion. At the age of 49, like at what point do we stop being a waste man and grow up? Like, you're 49, an Italian stallion. Anyway, this man had a deep loathing for women. And then you have his distant cousin, Kenneth Bianco. He was considered an all American boy who traveled to California for the sun, sea, and women. He's also known to be a compulsive liar and thief. Much like his cousin, he also has a sick loathing for women, and they have a desire for humiliating and brutalizing them. Their fishing grounds, per se, were the streets of Hollywood. The area surrounding it would be filled with runaways, addicts, homeless people, and ladies of the night. Bianco was a smooth talker. He had a lot of street smarts, and then pairing him with the predator in Buono, together they were a very toxic, dangerous match. These men went on a 4-month killing spree, murdering 10 young women. Many of their bodies were dumped. They were just dumped like they were trash. Like these were human beings. During the sickening rampage, they kidnapped women. I use the term women very loosely because these victims were aged from the age of 12 to 28. They kidnapped, raped them, and strangled them to death. The first victim that they preyed upon was Yolanda Washington, aged 19. She was found dead on October 18th, 1977, on the hills of Griffith Park. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. According to ABC News, she had been raped and there were markings around her wrists and her ankles. This would become the serial killer's signature mark on all of these girls. Now, Dr. Lois Lee, the founder of Children of the Night, which is a non-profit organization, and they rescue victims of sex trafficking. She did state in many of the documentaries that Yolanda was a very beautiful, refined young black woman, and she was working in order to support her daughter. Lee had met Washington as a result of her being an advocate for sex workers. And she also commented in the documentary saying she had pride, she has self esteem, and she carried herself very well. Weeks later, on Halloween of 1977, nude body of Judith Miller, just age 15, was also found on the hills overlooking Glendale. According to ABC News, her body marked with those same markings around the wrists and ankles. It had been dumped by a curb in a residential neighborhood. Like, they clearly wanted people to see what they had done. They were not secretive about it and they were not trying to cover it up. Now, she was found in a very sexual position. It was clear that she had been dropped there intentionally, says a former reporter, Jim Mitchell, adding that she had been strangled and bound by her wrists and ankles. Miller did say that she was on the streets of Hollywood quite a bit, and according to Mitchell, she may have actually been a sex worker from time to time. She may have been a runaway. I could not find too much about that, but unfortunately, whether she was a sex worker or not, you need to keep in mind that this is a 15-year-old child. My daughter is 14. She's gonna be 15 this year. Like, it is absolutely terrifying to think that somebody could even think about doing this to a child, because 15 is a child. On November 6, 1977, the body of Lisa Caston, 21, was discovered dumped in the Chevy Chase Canyon area near a country club. She was found naked with the same markings on her wrists and ankles. She appeared to have been brutally raped, says the retired Glendale homicide detective Joe Chester. Caston was a local waitress who was trying to become a professional dancer in the LA scene. She was just a young woman trying to make it in Hollywood. Chester tells producers of the Hillside Strangler the night that she disappeared, her co workers noticed that she had been talking to two customers and they'd been acting extremely suspicious. On November 19th, 1977, homicide detective Bob Gogan, I'm just going to refer to him as Bob, but Bob is going to become our detective. So he was assigned the case, and he would soon learn that due to the marks on their wrists and ankles, and they also had no defensive wounds. But the fact that there was no defensive wound shows that whoever killed them, this person either knew them or definitely trusted them. And then that leads us to Dolores, also known as Dolly. Dolly was only 12 years old, and she was with her best friend who was only 14, Sonia. They were the Hillside Stranglers' youngest victims. The two were known to be very close, and they were abducted, getting off the bus of Eagle Rock Plaza, according to the Los Angeles Times. Their bodies were found on November 20th. Their murders, likely because of their age, is what helped push all of these other cases into the spotlight, because it did ignite the fear in the residents of Los Angeles. Now, on November 20th, the body of Christina Reckler, age 20, was found partially under a bush on the hillside of a residential area in Los Angeles. She had the same markings on ankles and neck and all around her neck. There were no self defense wounds. However, there were two puncture holes in her arm, which later determined that they'd actually flushed cleaning fluid inside of her to torture her. She was attending the Art Center College of Design. She was described by people as a very quiet, honest student. She was very quiet and shy. Reckler's body was found just miles away from her apartment in Glendale. Then the body of Evelyn Jane King, age 28, was discovered on November 23rd of 1977. So now they're speeding up their process, right? They're now not caring. They haven't been caught for any of the murders as of late, so they're being more reckless. King was an actress who vanished while waiting for the bus. Her body was found in some bushes just off the freeway ramp. On all of the documentaries that I watched with her mother, there was a news footage of her mother saying she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, to me, that's all of these victims, right? None of them, regardless of financial status, career choices, homeless or not, like, nobody deserves this. But they also noticed in this case, it started to stand out on how they had no defensive wounds. Again, leaning into the fact that whoever killed these women, they trusted them for some reason. Now, the next victim is Laura Wagner. Laura Wagner is 18 and she was going to business school, and her body was found on November 29th, 1977. Mitchell Kessler, a retired forensic investigator with the Los Angeles Police Department, notes that he appeared to have been pulled over, so as if somebody pulled over to the side of the road, much like a police stop, right? Like those anxiety ridden lights come on and you pull over to the side to speak to a police officer. Like other victims, her body was found on a hillside. To add to the disgusting list of things that these men do to these women, they've also now added torturing, because investigators didn't know that it appeared to that she had burns on her hands from an electrical cord. Kessler found evidence suggesting that Wagner had been handcuffed at this point. Investigators concluded that either a police officer was involved or somebody posing as a police officer may have been the culprit. As a result, they issued a warning to female drivers that are stopped by officers to make sure they are actual police officers. Women were no longer obligated to pull over. They were told that if they did see those lights and they were being pulled over for any reason, they were told to drive either to a police station or to their home in the name of safety. At this point, they were investigating police officers too, because they came to the conclusion that the killers were either police officers or impersonating police officers. I know I keep messing with my hair. It's just in the mirror when I got ready for work this morning, my hair looked super cute, and now on the camera, it just does not. It's just a frizz-ball from the humidity. Plus, my son is sick, so I'm running back and forth. But that's neither here nor there. But anyway, I digress. So back to the topic. So they were impersonating police officers. Now, on December 14th, 1977, the body of Kimberly Martin, age 17, was found deserted on a lot near Los Angeles City Hall. Now, Martin, her sister, Marcel Martin, she reflects on all of the documentaries that while they were growing up in foster homes, Kimberly was often the protector. And then eventually, after years, they were separated as kids. And Marcella, I apologize. Um, she heard from her sister years later after they were separated, and they actually met up that Thanksgiving. So imagine they'd been separated for years and they'd finally got back in touch. And it's now December and they've just met up again back on Thanksgiving of the same year. His sister said that Kimberly had a nice apartment on Sunset Boulevard, and that's why they cooked a large Thanksgiving meal together. According to her sister, Kimberly had told her that she was a model and her career was taking off. But on December 13th, during a phone call to her sister, she told her that things in her life were not quite as they seemed, and she couldn't tell her about it yet. But she wanted her to know that her life wasn't perfect. She hadn't told her at the time, but she was actually working as a sex worker. To be more precise, she was an escort. She was soon found murdered, and it appeared that she had been lured out by her killers through the escort service. Now, this particular escort service was usually really strict, but it seems like this one kind of slipped through the cracks, per se, because they would always have to be on a registered number, because you've got to keep in mind this is before everybody had a cell phone. But the number that the call was made from when it was tracked down was actually from a library. Forensics were able to do fingerprints, but imagine how many people touched that phone booth throughout a day in a public service, because back then, again, nobody had cell phones, so everybody would use public phones. But her body had been dumped over the side of the hill of a Silver Lake area. It was extremely visible to the police headquarters. Again, this all doesn't sit right with me because they also had reports that people in the apartment building that she was sent to all heard her screaming in the commotion and nobody reported it until after. Cindy was a 20-year-old waitress whose body was discovered alongside her beloved orange car. This was on February 17th, 1978. Her former co-worker Wanda Huff describes the teen as very shy and innocent. She had her own apartment and was supporting herself. Wanda said that she would often go to nightclubs, but she didn't drink, she was a dancer. This girl was living life. She enjoyed to dance, she was working, she had her own place, she'd got a brand new car, and she was just murdered. Her life was taken from her way too short. Huff remembers the horrific feeling that she had seeing the victim's car being pulled up a cliff on television after learning that she had been murdered. Imagine the trauma, somebody you knew and saw on a regular basis, and you just learned that they got murdered, and then watching their body in their vehicle being pulled off a cliff. Her body was actually found in the trunk of her car. She had been strangled, and there were the same marks around the wrists and ankles as the other victims. So, luckily, all of the murders had suddenly stopped. Weeks went by, and then it turned into months. 10 females in 5 months. It appeared to be the perfect crime because they had no clues. And almost 150 detectives had worked on this case, including our detective. And they conducted the largest manhunt in the history of LA. And the killers were essentially still out there and nobody knew where they were. What was found out is that the two suspects actually had a falling out, and this is where their perfect crime in literally getting away with murder starts to unravel. Now, Bianco was well best known for, well, I guess he was on his ego trip, right? Because he had now become very unpredictable, and Buono did not like this. So they had a falling out over it because Bianco kept bragging to people about what he had done, and Buono was he was not going to deal with this, right? So they went their own way. So back in December, he had the balls to actually go to the police station and tell them he was interested in becoming a police officer. He even did two ride alongs with two different sergeants from the LAPD. During this time, he was asking a lot of questions about the Hillside Stranglers and wanted to see the crime scenes. To which, of course, Buono got upset because it's like, dude, you're playing with my life. We are literally getting away with murder and you're trying to get us caught. So they think that Buono was the controlling factor when it came to how they were getting away with things. Kenneth actually went ahead and moved 1,000 miles away up north to a small fishing town in Washington state. There was only 6 detectives in that whole state. He did move there with his girlfriend and now young son, and he got a job as a security guard, which only lasted for a year before he had to prove Bono from his egotistical ways that he could just unalive women by himself. He didn't need Bono. Now he lured two university girls, Karen Maddock and Diana Wilder, to a house he was doing a sitting job at. It was in a very pretty well off neighborhood where he went ahead and strangled and unalived them. The next day, their bodies were found in the boot of an abandoned car. Trunk. They were found in the trunk of an abandoned car. Reports say that their lack of cleverness is what almost threw them off from finding out that he was a Hillside Strangler. Because I'm pretty sure with his ego trick that drove him nuts, right? It probably drove him nuts. He left a trail of evidence connecting him to the girls from the sitting job because, of course, he lied to the police, telling them that he didn't even know the girls. But the police took him in and he acted like it was, oh, nonchalant. It was just a misunderstanding, a case of you have the wrong suspect. But this dummy had one of the victim's coats near the security booth he was working in. He was arrested and This trial would take the Hillside Strangler into legal history. How stupid that this man could be. He's claiming he doesn't know any of them yet. The keys to the house he was house sitting that they were murdered in, and the scarf to the other victim was inside his work truck. While when they got to the house, they even found one of the girl's hairs alongside his pubic hair. When they did a background check on him, Lukey here, they found out that he had moved from LA, the known locations to where the Stranglers, right? Because they were very isolated on their locations, and they noticed that his address linked up to that. Since the last murder of Hollywood, Detective Gowen's marriage had fallen apart. Poor detective's life had fallen apart while working on this case. He now lived by himself, and he received that wonderful call from his partner stating that they may have got the biggest break to this case. There was clues because there was 4 separate instances, but on one of those instances was he was caught with handcuffs and a police badge from a task force interview. Now, nothing came of this interview, which I don't understand why. I feel like police officers just don't communicate with each other, but nothing came from this interview initially. But during this time, one detective stayed in LA to investigate this further, while the other one went to go pay his wife a visit. And they did go ahead and, of course, get a warrant and research the home. They came to the conclusion that the wife was not involved at all. In fact, she was completely ignorant to the other side of her husband. Now, upon searching the house, they did find a ring and a necklace. They asked her if they belonged to her, and she had no recollection of them. Come to find out that the ring belonged to our first victim, and the necklace belonged to Kimberly Martin, which, of course, this would become very crucial evidence linking him to the murders. Of course, he denied the charges, saying he had no memory of killing them, and for some reason, he agreed to be put under hypnotherapy. Now, I don't know if he went into this with the mindset of ego or if he purely didn't think that he would be hypnotized, because I know I used to be a complete skeptic of being hypnotized. I used to think that, oh, these are paid actors. They're just, I thought it was fake. I did. I honestly thought it was fake. Until I went to Vegas with my friend and I got hypnotized on stage. And I want you to keep in mind, I am extremely socially awkward. If you could tell from my earlier videos, even being on camera, I became very uncomfortable, and I'm still now getting used to it. But me being extremely shy, socially awkward, hate being center of attention, after being hypnotized, I was on the stage performing the YMCA. Without a care in the world, I don't know why I was doing it, but I was full blown singing. I can't sing to save my life, but I was singing YMCA and doing the whole dance. Yep, being hypnotized actually works. While he was being hypnotized, another side of his personality came out, and he confessed to the murders. With 16 hours of recording time, his alter ego Steve. Now, I don't know why his alter ego was called Steve, but come on, Steve. But Steve was a foul-mouthed, aggressive, and hated the other side of him, Kenny, for being, as he quoted, weak. Now, to me, Steve or Kenneth, both sides of you are completely weak for you to overpower women. Most of these were young, vulnerable women. You're weak.
Tape. It was a Walt Disney production from front to back. It made you sick. I remember Salerno's comments, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. The doctor who was conducting that, oh God almighty, the most unprofessional piece of psychiatry I've ever seen in my life.
Hi. Hi. Are you Ken? Do I look like Ken?
It was the most self-serving act by a professional doctor to promote his own values on hysteria.
Okay.
I wrote him a letter afterwards, telling him what a despicable, unprofessional he was.
So what? Okay.
If Bianchi could convince the
Of course, if Bianchi had convinced them he was insane, he wouldn't have to stand trial at all. But we all know at this point that he just loves to be center of attention. He is an attention slut. And the more they gave him, the more he opened said up. Kenny was innocent in all of this. And Steve, dum dum dum. Guess what Steve did? He grasped on his cousin Angelo Buono, saying that he was such a wonderful man and he's so amazing and he helped kill all of these girls with him.
Going too fast?
Yeah, you're going so damn fast. I'm not that smart. Okay. I'm not as bright as you are, so let's cool it and slow it down.
This man is a waste of breath. Like, look at him just pointing out these poor girls like they're in a freaking catalog. He just craves attention. He thinks he's a big man and he's nothing but the words I have for this man.
Okay, all right.
But anyway, but he was also now putting Buono into the mix.
This one I killed.
As you can see in this video, the doctor is appealing to his ego, and this dummy is just giving them all the answers. They said that after this, they would drop the death penalty in exchange for admitting to the last two killings and to testify against his cousin. And just 2 days later, our wonderful investigator got the orders to go fetch him. Go fetch Buono, with a warrant to search his shop and the house. At this point, the detective figured out Buono must have been the brains of the operation, because Bianchi, well, let's face it, he isn't so clever, right? When they arrested him, he admitted to losing his cool, and I fully understand why he would lose his cool. This man lost his marriage trying to catch these sick individuals. It had consumed his life, and then on top of that, Buono lacked all emotion, which I'm sure made him more angry, because it would definitely infuriate me. Like, I caught you, you did this mess up stuff, and you're just like, oh well. Like, what do you mean, oh well? These were young women and children. How he described his reaction reminded me much of, you know, when you have those like horrible dreams where for some reason you're fighting somebody or something, and no matter how much you connect, you're not hurting this person whatsoever, and it's just so infuriating, especially when you wake up and you're like, I feel like that's how this police officer felt in this scenario. The detective did say that Buono was very dumb, but he was also very street smart. Buono almost got dismissed. Like, this man almost got his case dismissed because the judge that they went before only likes open shut cases, and he didn't believe that Bianco would that the jury would believe that his cousin assisted him. And of course, it basically all came down to politics. Camp, who was a DA, had a political aspiration, and he was worried about not being able to win the case and catch the Hillside Strangler, because keep in mind this is a very public case worldwide at this point. And he was worried that if he didn't if this did not win, it would affect his elections further on down the road. Now, forget about the poor victims, right? This all makes you sound so goddamn selfish. Like, these poor women and children were murdered, and you're worried about your political career instead of putting them behind bars. To me, people like you have just as much blood on your hands as the murderers. You are a disgusting human being. People like you are just as bad as the criminals, if not worse. Good job our detective had a little control, because he did say at this point his frustration, he wanted to shoot these people. Because he was about to let a man go for murdering 10 people go over ego. He said on an interview that the political system in this country sometimes just makes you sick. However, Judge Ronald George stunned the court by denying the motion to dismiss. The trial lasted 2 years, being on record as the longest trial in American history. In November 1981, the case went to trial. They did let the jury know that Kenneth was going to lie, but he was also going to mix the truth in there. Now, I have an ex like this where they would tell you a glimpse of the truth mixed in with a lie to where you didn't really understand what was true and what wasn't. So he did ask them to focus on the evidence in order to convict him, the evidence as a whole. With 251 witnesses and over 1,000 exhibits of evidence, the jury went ahead and retired on October 1st, 1983. 10 days later, Buono was convicted of the murder of Lauren Wagner. I think his life sentence is very fitting because he only gets 1 hour a day to breathe fresh air. 1 hour. I think that's too much, but that's me. 1 hour a day to be able to breathe fresh air. And I feel like this is suiting more than the death penalty because this man should suffer. Because 10 women, 10 young girls and women lost their entire life because of these waste men. Well, that's it this week for me, guys. Thank you so much grabbing a brew with me and joining me for this wine and crime episode. Please tune in next Monday because my big sister is coming to visit me from England. So we will be doing where we're going to tell you about the creepy house that we grew up in. And we have totally different perspectives because we did not get along much as kids, so we didn't collaborate a lot as kids. So this is going to be very interesting. But yeah, go ahead and join us. Oh, and also, if you have children, please check out our children channel at Living My Best Life LLC because I do read stories for the kiddos along with the children's books that I write. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope you have an amazing week. Bye.